Yeah, so that's a really good point. You mentioned a couple of different things there which have to do with pleasure as well as finding it really hard to um give up, I guess you could say. Is there anything you want to expand on from that before I kind of discuss that topic?
No, 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 it's fine.
Yeah. So I think when we're talking about like pleasure and all these sorts of things, it's a really interesting topic because like if you were to, let's say you were to go traveling and you were to have a meal presented to you and you would just eat that meal not really questioning anything, and then someone was to tell you that was dog or anything like that, you may have really enjoyed it in the moment, but then all of a sudden you just start to feel
Mm.
sick and you feel repulsed, like it could have a real effect on you because I use the example of dog all the time because most people either have a pet dog or they know someone with a pet dog which they truly love and associate themselves and I think the next bit I want to get to before kind of answering your point is a very, very common vegan question, which holds its merit every single time. And the question is, what is the trait difference which justifies killing one animal over the other?
That you, oh, it's a good question. So like you mean killing a cow over a dog, for example?
Yes, of course, and I would also expand that into I can see why some people don't want to do it, but I attribute the same question towards humans. So I'm not saying that dogs and humans and pigs and cows are the
Mm,
same, but I don't see a trait difference between any
yeah.
sentient being that justifies killing one, not the other.
Mm, yeah. That I had to think about that because you can become attached to certain animals. In fact, if anything, you could probably become attached to any animal, really.
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%.
so yeah, I wouldn't say that. I mean, we've been brought up to love dogs, and
Yeah,
dogs have evolved in a way, really,
yeah,
and so have cats
yeah,
to become more in touch with humans.
yeah.
Whereas because animals like cows and pigs and pretty much livestock are like so far separated from us that it's easier for
Exactly.
us to sort of just deal with it, just get on with it
Exactly. And
and accept it.
yeah, you bring up a really good point, which I think a big problem. This is why I love having conversation with people like yourself because I don't feel any negative towards people like yourself, even though in theory you're going against an injustice, which I think is first
Mm.
of all, I think we most people you'd ask, they'd say I'm animal lovers, but the vast majority of people contribute to unnecessary harm in from I guess base of the conversations that we're going to have today. So yeah, so back to the point there with the trait difference. The like I said, there is no sort of trait difference. You mentioned one before, which has to do with sort of taste, or let's call it pleasure. And it's definitely the case. Like if you like, even if you want to say, people say like, oh, like people said this to me, like, don't you ever just feel like a tasty burger? To be honest, no. But let's assume for this argument, yes. Let's imagine I'm craving meat, or I'm just like I want to have a burger made of meat, right? I choose not to simply because I don't think my sensory pleasure is more important than an animal's life, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing towards a dog, the same thing towards a human, right? This is not justified in my position, right? Um, so I was just trying to get my train of thought there. So yeah, yeah. So like I've just remembered now to expand on that. Sensory pleasure can expand in other different ways as well. Like when we talk about like this is a big topic within the feminism world, within towards men. Imagine a man was to rape a woman, and the man was to be like, "Oh, it's okay. It's my choice. I have power over that person, and it feels good to me, and I like
Mm.
how it feels." You and I would just be like, what the hell, dude? Like that's not okay. but the person's literally used the same justification as we do to consume animal-based products,
Mm,
right?
mm.
So I don't think sensory pleasure, taste, those sorts of things are a justification towards eating animals. Even if you do, again, like sex feels great, but it's like the difference between sex and rape is consent, right? I don't think there's a way to
Yeah,
get consent from an animal to eat them. I don't think an animal that wants to live is, uh, can be killed humanely, because what is humane murder but an oxymoron, really? So I don't know. Does that kind of cover that sort of aspect of it, or yeah, does that make sense?
it's one of those points that you have to reflect on because
Yeah,
it's yeah. I mean, like from what the point you made about the difference, the the whole rape and pleasure thing. You make a great point, but it's. I suppose it comes down to what you what you value more. I suppose in that situation is that the pleasure bit, the culling of animals so you can eat them for pleasure, is because you don't value animals on the same level as humans,
yeah,
or you clearly don't, right?
mm,
I can, I can, I can, I can admit that I value human life over an animal for sure.
but what I want to make clear is that we're not, in this example, we're not valuing human life over animal life. What we're valuing is our sensory pleasure over their life, which is
Right.
infinitely times less, in my opinion. Right. And
Mm,
and this is a big problem people tend to have with veganism. It's just like, what, you think animals are more important than humans. Like, no one is saying that. No one has ever said that. What we're saying is
mm,
that the 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of pleasure that
yeah.
you have by eating something multiple times per day is not a justification for killing them. That's it. It's and keep
Mm,
in mind, we're living in 2023 where we have an alternative, which is fine. Let's say 90% there. Like, bro, I think 90%
yeah, yeah.
is close enough.
What I want, yeah, I guess what I wanted to say was it's not a justification to kill it, but it's like when you've been eating it and it's always been normal and you like it, and
There's
then
one of the
and then
ends.
it's like now someone's explaining to you actually what you're doing is wrong, and you're like,
Mm.
but I like it.
Yeah,
It's just it's a very, yeah, it's definitely something I need to reflect on because I haven't really thought about it. And I think that's part of the issue that you
yeah,
have is that people haven't really thought about it. We're
yeah,
just kind of just unknowingly going through life eating meat. And because we don't see it slaughtered,
exactly.
we don't see the cruelty that they're exposed to,
Yeah,
um, it doesn't affect us. And I'm definitely probably in the group of people who don't want to know about it.
yeah,
I have to admit that like
yeah,
it's one of those things like I don't like to see animals be
yeah,
abused and all the rest of it. Um, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
that's what I have to say on that.
you actually used the word normal there at one point as well, and you're absolutely right. It is normal, like within society, which I think is a huge shame, right? I think it's extremely normal. It's extremely normal. I think it's extreme. It's an extreme shame that the normal is to eat meat, when I think the norm should be like, I believe at one point the people who eat meat are going meat, dairy, and eggs are going to be such a minority. People are going to be like, whoa, what is wrong with those people? But all in good time. I think this is a huge transitional moment, and us being able to have this conversation, and being able to reach people on YouTube and being able to reach people at an audience, I think is important. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
there's something just sort of arrived in my mind. Do you think that because there wasn't anyone really fighting the corner of animals many years ago,
yeah,
now there is? Do you think that's because we're now privileged? We're now in a privileged position
yeah,
to now, because we're so fortunate in the day
mm,
in this day and age to have access to everything due to technology and
mm,
ease of access to food. Do you think that
yeah,
that also? Do you think like now that we? Well, I suppose there's two questions there.
yeah.
Do you think that many years ago, before we arrived at this point in time, that it was necessary to eat meat? Number two, do you think that do you believe that now that we've arrived at this point in time, that now it's not necessary and
Mm.
we can all eat plant-based? I imagine
Yes.
your answer is yeah.
I've been saying yes the whole time, but actually I have to disagree with one of the points. Veganism's actually been around for quite a while now. When we talk about things like the Vegan Society, which is the website I referred to before, I believe they've been around since the 1940s, so it's almost 100 years ago. So it's actually crazy to kind of think that, because like 100 years is a long time. What I can
Mm.
agree with is that this is a conversation I had with George, is that nowadays, so like 2023, that sort of thing, is now vegans impose a threat. They pose a threat to people who are carnists. They pose a threat because it's becoming extremely mainstream and extremely more accepted to be vegan. And the way non-vegans see it is it's a threat. It's them imposing their beliefs on me, which if we actually think about it, it's imposing the it's imposing to remove us from things that have never belonged to us in the first place, right? The autonomy of an animal has never belonged to us in the first place. Saying that you're taking meat away from me, well, the argument for us would be it never was yours to begin with. So that's the kind of argument of that. So when we talk about that, yeah, if you said like in the past, like if we're talking about like thousands and thousands of years ago, I kind of want to use the example I mentioned before, was like if you're in a position where it's absolutely necessary in a case of survival, I I can't really argue anything against that, right? The
Mm.
same way, there's cases of cannibalism happening during an airplane crash, where an airplane crashes and these humans have eaten other passengers who didn't happen to survive or passed away shortly after. And you're kind of like disgusted, but at the same time, you're kind of like, oh, maybe I would have done the same. I don't know. Like I don't really have that. And it's an interesting conversation because for 99.9% of people in the Western world, we don't really have that problem, right?
Yeah.
If you're a homeless person and you're literally starving and you have got no option and someone's throwing out some food that they haven't eaten and it's not vegan, I can't really say much to that person. I can't like I'm not going to sit there just being like you're wrong for eating animal-based products. I can't really say it. Like I think most vegans would say that. But you know, for us, it's when you go to these like places where the homeless people have been donated food and stuff like that. The vast majority of it is rice, beans, lentils, all the cheapest foods you can think of, because that's what's so easily available, and people are willing to donate that because it's like peanuts to them, like literally peanuts, right? Um, if you want to go as far back as 2000 years ago, I don't think in the last 2000 years we've had much justification for eating animals, right? They've been there. We've been exploiting animals. If we're talking from a population point of view, we've like animals have been the most genocide creatures on this planet by far. And that's simply, I'm talking about from a population point of view. I think every injustice, every atrocity that has happened in life has its own merit, has its own point. Veganism, as well as many other injustices, are a non-action, meaning that you don't have to do anything except not contribute to it. Meaning if we're talking about female rights to vote, you don't have to force women to vote. You just have to not be against it, right? If we want to
Yeah.
talk about the LGBTQ plus community, like they've been removed rights in many countries, even to this day. You don't have to be an LGBTQ plus advocate or anything, but you just don't have to stand against their rights to
Mm.
vote, to get married, to have partners. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the
One
same
hundred
thing,
percent.
and the same thing with animal-based products. I had a friend of mine who, when we talked about veganism, he started saying things like, "Oh, but there's worse problems out there." And I was like, "Can you name one worse problem that I can't contribute to, as well as being vegan?" And he's like talking about like corrupt governments. And I'm like, why can't I be vegan and be against corrupt governments? I don't understand. Like, why are you
Yeah,
saying it's one
yeah,
or the other? Like, I just because I'm vegan doesn't mean I don't care about the corruption within governments. Like, that's
yeah,
not, it's a non-action. I don't have to contribute to it. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Anything to add to that,
yeah.
or
No.
anything that's kind of popped up, or I don't know, have we covered a large portion there?
Um, yeah, yeah. We've definitely covered quite a bit. I mean, I'm just really taking in what we've been discussing, really.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say I agree with mm, probably almost everything you've said.
Hmm.
Um, I I was thinking about like sort of still the pleasure aspect.
Yeah.
I think that I can sit here now and say if they're able to produce an alternative that's just like the thing, just like the real thing, that I would happily eat that for the rest of my life. And you've
Let's
heard it here.
Yeah. Let's assume that they don't, because first of all, I want to say that
Right.
I think if I eat a burger right now made of animal flesh, I would probably vomit. But I don't want to sit here and pretend that like like I don't understand your point. But let's assume that we have no alternatives. Like we've got plenty of
Mm.
calories, we can get plenty of protein, we can get the vitamins, we can get the minerals. We just don't have an alternative that tastes as close to. I mean, you could say like a bean burger, which I'm not particularly like. I don't like bean burgers or beetroot burgers, that sort of thing. Like I'm not a huge fan of that. Um, let's imagine they don't like create these alternatives. Do you think it's justified to eat, to kill animals for sensory pleasure?
No,
Okay. So that goes against your previous statement.
of eating them. If there's an alternative, yeah. It does, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
I know it's a contradiction. It's like I guess it's a bit like if I were to say that there's nothing really that's going to change it. So those animals that are being killed and put on the shelves, you
Yeah.
may as well eat them because it's just going to go to waste
And why are they on the shelf in the first place?
because people are consuming it,
Yeah,
and so they're just
supply and demand.
right.
Everything we've talked about is transitional. I would love if everyone just went vegan overnight, simply because we would have far less animals being killed unnecessarily. However, I'm also understanding that it is not going to be an overnight situation, much like many other injustices that we've had in the past. My dad's from Libya, and Libya is a country which still exercises human slavery. So people love to believe it doesn't exist anymore. Unfortunately, it still does. And the sooner that we transition, the less suffering and death we'll have in that first place. So supply and demand is a big thing, because we can say, you know, as vegans, we can say F you to the farmers, we can say F you to McDonald's, we can say F you, but the reality is we, the consumers, are the problem.
Mm,
We are the ones that actually have the vote. And industries like, let's say, fast food industry are one of the biggest problems, but they're also one of the biggest solutions. Because if the world stops buying those products and says we want more vegan options, vegan McDonald's, vegan KFC, which is already happening, it's transitioning, they can provide a huge um, transition within the world, and solve many of the problems in the first place
yeah,
that he caused in the first place.
you I guess like your strategy is to appeal to people's morals, right? Is that right?
I mean,
Like a lot of the time, and
from a vegan standpoint, that's literally
yeah,
the
yeah,
only
yeah,
argument. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So, but you're going on this assumption that every like people, the majority of people actually care
yeah.
about animals, right?
I think the vast majority of people, if I asked them,
I
they would
think
say
I've got a
yes.
slightly more. I think I've got a slightly more like pessimistic view. Um,
Sure, sure.
I don't think like I don't think I. I'm just pulling out a number out my ass here, but I think it's more than 50% of the world like don't like a lot don't care.
Yeah, that
Um,
their actions definitely show that.
that's still not a good reason for me to continue
Yeah,
perpetuating it, of course. But yeah, I'm very much. I would say that would be my only I do feel bad saying it, but I have to be honest. I kind of feel like it just won't change.
Mm.
Not in my generation anyway, but yeah,
Do you-
it's definitely something to think about.
yeah. I've said a few times already. I like how you kind of encompasses we as a population, which shows that you care about everyone. At the same time, I want people to understand that we as individuals have a sort of responsibility, and this happens a lot within activist group who talk to people who say like, "Why can't you eat more plant-based food?" And then their sort of general response would be like, "Well, I've got this friend, and that friend doesn't like vegetables," and it's like, first of all, we're not talking about your friend. We're talking about you as one person. Like you can make an impact the same way that every single person individually can make an impact. And a lot of these activist group are essentially trying to talk to one person at a time, which seems like a very slow process. But
Yeah.
hopefully the message of me being vegan only 6 years, like I say only 6 years because I know so many people who've been essentially their whole life, um, and having a conversation with you, I'm able to talk it out a bit more and just have that conversation and to the very least have a small win, which would be, I've spoken to people who are just like literally F vegans, and then the next, like after being friends with them for a while, they'd be like, I might actually try this vegan alternative, see what it's like.
Mm.
Even though they're not fully vegan yet, it's a huge win for many people
Yeah.
anyway. So um yeah, I guess to go back to your point, which was essentially people not caring, you're absolutely right. It might not be in our generation, might not, but I want to know that I've done my part. I want to know that I've made an impact to my degree. And, just because other people are doing it, I don't think is a justification. Um, I don't have to have a sanctuary full of animals to be to have moral consistency. Once again, this is a non-action. I could say, like if we're talking like the example of another injustice, which would be racism. Just because I'm not racist towards, let's say, an Asian group, doesn't mean I have to be in a relationship with someone who's of Asian descent, right? Doesn't mean
Right.
that person doesn't deserve the respect, the ability to be with whoever they choose to be, obviously assuming consent, right? The same way, like I care about all animals. I doesn't mean like I'm not gonna freak out if I see a snake run across the road in front of me. I'm just gonna be like, oh my God, and run the other way. Doesn't mean like I would hate it or anything. If I was in a survival scenario and I had to kill an animal just to stay alive,
I
instinctively I
mean,
would
it's the
probably do
same.
it.
Yeah, it's the same if you were in a an altercation with a human. Like,
Exactly.
you might have to defend. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Exactly. And you're with your martial arts skill, I would never mess with you. So um but yeah, dude, like I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Like I reckon we're gonna probably have a few more conversations down the line as well. We can take a few more videos, a few more interviews. I kind of want to wrap it up there, but I obviously want to give you the chance to say anything else that you want to.
um, what, just anything or anything
Yeah, I
in
mean, like
particular?
how has this conversation been for you? Like, have you kind of changed your position in some parts at least, or have they stayed the same? Or
It's one of those things I have to think over because everything's kind of fresh on my mind.
yeah,
I was anticipating a lot of the points that you brought up. Um, it's one of those things where I have to come to terms with like the fact that I haven't cared as much as I should.
mm,
And from the very fact that I don't like seeing animals abused
yeah,
is is a clear sign that really I should be supporting it. But it's like it's just one of those things. It's I've got lots of priorities in my life, and the animals at the moment just aren't at the top.
mm,
And I say at the moment because things change over
yeah,
time. So that's really all I can say on that. What
yeah,
I will say is that I really appreciate the fact that you haven't forced it down. Like, you haven't really pushed your views. You haven't tried to force me to think a certain way. And I really respect that. And I also respect the fact that you believe so passionately in it and that you are trying to leave, some sort of change in the world, which
Yeah,
I really, really I honestly really respect that. So yeah, I'd be happy to have more conversations on the subject. Maybe
fantastic.
other conversations as well, if
I
you're up
love
for
that,
it.
dude. You know, just because you've mentioned it already, I think it took me about 2 years from the most fresh conversation like what we've had. Probably like it took 2 years from that point to actually be like, you know what, I need to make a change in my life. So I don't expect everyone to be overnight. It's an ideal situation, I believe. But you know, I think it's great that you've been very open to answer honestly, transparently, and you know. You haven't given the sort of usual BS, which is kind of like, well, how do you know animals don't suffer? Like I love the fact that you're very like we're very honest about the fact that we know what happens in these industries, and we can have a decent conversation about them and see and hear both sides of the coin.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, you. I'm assuming, but you've been doing this for a while, so I'm assuming you've heard it all. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Look, Rupert, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate this. We've gone to the point where we've needed
thank
two
you.
recordings. Anyone who's listening in, apologies for that little middle gap in there. But yeah, yeah, honestly, Rupert, where can people find you, by the way? So this is my last question, which is like, what's your social media handles? What's your website? If someone wants to hire you as a martial arts coach or any form of PT coach, like where can they find you?
You can hit me up on my Instagram, Rupert Drew PT. I do have a website, but I've forgotten the actual the name of the
That's
website.
fine. I'm gonna get Rupert.
Conveniently,
Yeah, I'm gonna get Rupert. You're gonna send it to me anyway, and I'm gonna put it in the description.
yeah,
So anyone who's interested, they
perfect,
just click on the description. Yep.
perfect. Thank you very
All right.
much, mate.
Thanks,
See
Rupert.
you
Take
soon.
care. See you, mate. Bye.